And now for my next number, I'd like to return to the
classic. Time.
Hey guys, it's Alex. I'm back. That's right. Probably, I don't know for sure if this is going to be my last video before Christmas. I hope it isn't. But the way things are looking, it might be. Obviously when you're a DJ, Christmas and Halloween are usually the busiest times of the year. Particularly for me, because obviously Christmas parties and what have you. So I've got a few coming up over the next couple of weeks. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to get any more videos out to you before before Christmas. I think I've got a few Christmas parties after Christmas as well, which is really weird, I know, but anyway, I'm digressing. I thought if this is going to be my last video before Christmas, I wanted to make it a good one, and hopefully we can make this a thread response, or at least get, well, not a response to a thread, but get a thread going with this video, and that's basically just albums from the 2010s that you have loved. No rhyme or reason to any of these. I've pulled 20 albums out of my collection here. I've pulled 20. There's maybe 5 more albums I would have wanted to talk about, but I don't own on physical media, so I can't show you them. But I was going to do my top 10 of the 2010s, but as I was pulling stuff out, I realized that it was going to be very difficult for me to pick a top 10 out of these 20. Not those records there, but the ones I have down here. It was going to be hard to pick 10 out of those 20, so I'm just going to show you all 20. There is no rhyme or reason to any of these. I've just put them in a random order that I want to talk about them in, and we're going to do that. So the only one that is in any kind of order is this one. The first one I'm going to show you. This is probably my favorite album of the 2010s. And yeah, like I said, no rhyme or reason except for comps, no compilations, but yeah, live albums can count. Posthumous albums, if any, came out. No, like, vault. Even if you like something that they found in the vault, go for it. No rhyme or reason, just no compilations, obviously. But this is no argument here, because this is one of my favorite albums of all time. So of course it's going to be in my my favorite of the decade, and I had to talk about it here because it is in my top 5 favorite albums of all time. I'll say that. That's Malibu by Anderson .Paak. Just from front to back, I love this entire album. There's a song on here for every mood. Starts off with a nice jazzy piece in The Bird, and then goes to a hip-hop piece with The Waters and The Season, and then from there it goes to like an R&B piece with Put Me Through, which of course is just incredible. So had to give this album a mention. Hands down my favorite album of the decade, one of my favorites of all time, as I said. When this came out, it blew me away. It's probably my favorite album of that year, 2016. And I just remember where I was when I first heard this. I was mind blown. I don't think I've ever heard anything at the time this came out. I don't think I'd heard anything so diverse. I really don't. But yeah, this album really had a huge impact on me, and so for that reason, I do have to give Malibu a mention there by Anderson .Paak. I'm thinking of some more albums I could have mentioned before I continue on. Schoolboy Q's Oxymoron, Tame Impala's Currents. Those 2 albums I don't own physical copies of, so I can't show you. Childish Gambino's Awaken My Love. I was going to pull that, but I haven't. That album's hasn't impacted me as big as these 20 albums have. And that album, as much as I like it, it's more of an album I can just sit and listen to, and it didn't it didn't impact me on first listen. Like there was one or two tracks I liked, but that album had to grow on me. The 20 I'm showing you are 20 albums that, as soon as I listened to them, I was like, oh, these are amazing. Like, so yeah. Anyway, I'm digressing again. Let's move on to this. Yeah, you guys are probably wondering, oh, what the hell is that? This is Suits with their album Hold Still. They are a Canadian band out of Montreal. And what they are is they are a shoegaze band, and they were the second concert I ever attended at Scala in London, and that was a fantastic gig. The crowd was incredible. The band themselves were great live. They performed all the songs I knew well, including the song Instrument, which is probably the biggest song on here, the most well known anyway, off of this album. And I just remember when I first heard this album, because I was not a fan of shoegaze. This album came out the same year as Anderson .Paak. And yes, while I prefer another album in their catalogue to this album, I don't own that one. And as a full album, I think this one's actually easier to listen to if you're like trying to get into the group, into this band, or you're just like a casual shoegaze fan. This is probably the easier album to listen to. So yeah, this is probably the one that's better if you're new to this group. But if you're like well into them, then the other album that I like, which I don't own, is the one you should check out. And I'm not going to tell you which one it is. I'm just going to say this: if you want a full introduction to them, check out their song 2020. After you've checked out this. Yeah, this is a nice introduction to this group, Hold Still. And yeah, that album, man, blew my mind almost as much as Anderson .Paak did. But I got on that album much, much later. Because before that, I had just like really overlooked shoegaze as a genre, and that I don't think that's their most shoegazy album. It's a bit more indie, that album, but let's forget about it and move on to Good Kid, Mad City by Kendrick Lamar. Yes, when I first heard the recipe off of this album, I had to immediately go and check out the rest of it. And before this album, trap music, this new trap hip-hop genre of music, was something I very vastly overlooked. I mean, there's still some hip-hoppy songs on here, like Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst, The Recipe, obviously, Backseat Freestyle, but then you've also got songs like Poetic Justice, Money Trees, and Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe on this album, which are just incredible. Easily my favorite in Kendrick's catalog. I know he's got other albums that people will rate above this one, but just for sentimental reasons, I prefer this one. And this is the album that introduced me to Kendrick. And the only real reason I did check it out is because the recipe featured Dr. Dre, and the time that this album came out, I was still in full, like, diehard Eminem fan. So basically anything with Eminem, Dr. Dre, or 50 Cent on it, I was checking out, and Jay-Z, obviously, but that's the only reason I got into this. And as soon as I got into this, that's when my taste in music started to branch out much more wider than it already was. So yeah, Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid, Mad City really impacted me in a big way, as did this album. And this album's going to be so much different to what we've seen so far, because this one was actually in the charts throughout the majority of 2014. That's V by Maroon 5, or I think it's, yeah, it is. Is it V or is it? I think the album's name is V, but it could just be 5 because it's their 5th album, which I think is quite clever. And I still listen to this album from front to back today, because throughout all of 2014, Maps, Animals, and Sugar were the 3 songs that were basically played on the radio throughout the entire year. And a couple of years after that as well. So there was no escaping them. But I wanted to see what else they had on this album, because obviously those were the 3 big singles, but nothing else was ever being played. And as soon as I listened to Maps and Animals, which were the 2 big tracks, and as soon as it got to It Was Always You, and I heard the true vocal range of Adam Levine, the lead singer, I was mind blown. And this album forever became one of my favorites, probably in my top 50 somewhere. I couldn't tell you where, but hands down, V by Maroon 5 is an absolutely phenomenal album. Absolutely phenomenal. And of course, there's no escaping them on this channel. Arctic Monkeys, AM, the album that introduced me to them, of course, because as soon as I put the needle down on side 1 and heard Do I Want to Know, I was a fan. A die-hard fan. A fan who will get a ticket last minute to the gig, like the day of the gig, mind. Go to the gig on a Sunday evening when I know I'm going to miss the last train because it's earlier on a Sunday. Do whatever you can to get front row. Yeah. And just buy anything and everything with the Arctic Monkeys name on it. Yeah. This is a great album. I know it's not the best in their catalogue, but it did introduce a new fan base to Arctic Monkeys, particularly me. Well, it's not my favourite in their catalogue, because my favourite from their catalogue actually came out in the early 2000s. Or before the turn of the decade, I should say. So yeah, it came out in 2007, I think. But yeah, this album, out of the 3 albums they've put out in this decade so far, or yeah, in the decade, because we're almost finished. But I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just making up words at this point. But yeah, this album itself, man, let me tell you, this album, oof. If you want an album to get yourself into Arctic Monkeys, this is it. So many people my age have listened to this album and loved it, and become Arctic Monkeys fan on the strength. Much like Maroon 5, this one charted, and there's no escaping it, because most of the songs on this album actually did become singles. Dua Lipa's self-titled debut album from 2017. Yeah. Everything except for one of the tracks on here. All the singles in here came out in 2015 and 2016, but the album dropped in 2017. This in itself has to be one of my favorite albums, again, of the decade. Not of that year, I don't think, but definitely had a huge impact, just because it's one of those albums that, even though it charted and it's on the radio, even today you still hear these songs on the radio here in the UK. This album is so diverse, much like the Anderson .Paak album I showed you earlier. Every track on here is different and just has something on here for everybody. So of course I'm gonna have to have that. I do like Dua Lipa, I'm not gonna lie. This album is great, and I do like this album quite a bit. So had to grab that Dua Lipa, her self-titled album. So yes, that album, not gonna lie, not my favorite of 2017, but definitely high up on the list. Much like this album, Vancouver Sleep Clinic's Revival, their first album. Their second one's good, but I don't own it, and it didn't impact me as much as this one did on first listen. So, but the thing with their second album is it only came out in Australia on vinyl. Thanks for that, guys. And at the gig, they sold out of the vinyl. Great. But yes, this is Revival by Vancouver Sleep Clinic. Stellar album, not a bad track on here. They impacted me that much that I've seen them twice in 2 years. They're the only group I've ever seen twice. And they just their second time around was better than the first time, and this was just incredible. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. And look at the cover as well. I mean, if you don't like it if you don't want to like it for the cover or for the music, at least like it for the cover. Absolutely incredible. And yeah, the first time I heard this was at work, I think, because my boss played it in the store. And he's like, "Have you listened to this?" No, I haven't listened to this, but I'm liking it. And then we just sat and I just wanted to sit and listen to the whole album. And luckily, it was a quiet day, so we could do that. And I just fell in love with this album from the first song right until the very last song on the album. So yeah, this album definitely made a new fan in me out of Vancouver, Vancouver Sleep Clinic out of me. So there you go. Right, another album. This one's a soul album. Again, probably not as popular. I'm showing you guys a lot of albums that aren't that popular or as well known. But this one, hopefully, a few other people know this because it's quite an old school sounding album. Even though it came out last year, that's a good thing by Leon Bridges. He has a very, I want to say he has a very Sam Cooke-esque to his style. Some of the songs are a bit more like proper R&B, like, you know, the 80s, maybe going into some of the 90s R&B, but a lot of this has a 60s, 70s sort of feel to it. Particularly with his voice, he's such a great voice. And obviously the song Bad Bad News introduced me to this album, as did the song Beyond Shy, Forgive You, and If It Feels Good, Then It Must Be. But yeah, this album, man, just incredible from start to finish. He has such a voice, and again, another one that I got into through working in a record store, so gotta give props there. And of course, this album, I owe my entire channel to this album, because I think still to this day, this album, unboxing this album, is my most viewed video on the channel. And that's the first Cigarettes After Sex album. Their second album's still good, but I think I'm still letting it process because it only just came out this year. This album came out in 2017. Like I said, unboxing this was my first video on the channel, and it's my most viewed video. So I basically owe my entire channel to this album. But this is still a incredible album. Not one I can sit and listen to all the time. I kind of have to, nowadays I kind of have to be in the right mood, particularly as it's such a chilled album. But particularly in the summer months when I just want to sit down, chill, or I've had a stress day at work. Cigarettes After Sex saved the day for sure, man. And every song on this album, you can't beat it. I mean, the second album's just as good, but I always find myself going back to this one, just because of sentimental reasons. So, yeah, Cigarettes After Sex. There you go. And another one from last year, Walk Between Worlds, Simple Minds. Was it my favourite album of last year? No. At this point, I don't even remember what my favourite album of last year was. But I think, looking back on it, out of all the albums that did come out last year, this one probably had the biggest impact on me, which would make it my favourite. Not the best album of that year, but one of my favourites. Three Sides made a new fan in Simple Minds out of me. I mean, before this album came out, I really only knew Don't You Forget About Me, which is probably the only thing I knew from them. But after this album came out, I delved into their discography a hell of a lot more and fell in love with their music so much more. So Walk Between Worlds by Simple Minds is going to make it on there. Obviously the song Magic, which opens this album, is probably, and Summer as well. I mean, it's not that typical Simple Minds sound. It sounds a little bit more psychedelic, almost Tame Impala-esque sound ending album, which isn't like, you know, not, it's because it's, I remember it really taking me by surprise because it was so different from Don't You Forget About Me that I was kind of expecting this album to be like that, but it wasn't. And I remember it really caught me off guard, but I was like, this is not what I was expecting, but I really like it. So yeah, Simple Minds, Walk Between Worlds. This next one, this will probably change. By the time I get around to doing this list, which is my best of 2019. But so far, this is probably my favorite album of the year. And once again, it's one that's charted and you just can't escape it no matter where you go in the UK. However, this album, as new as it is, it's very, very good. And I just remember getting into this artist like last year through an ex-girlfriend of mine. She loved this artist, and I kind of got me into her, but I didn't get into her properly until this album came out. That's Billie Eilish. When We Fall Asleep, Where Do We... Is it called that? When We Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? Yeah. Very good album, and given that she's only 17 years of age, she's 17 or 18, I don't remember, but she's very, very talented. Songs like Bad Guy, When the Party's Over, Bury a Friend, Listen Before I Go. In fact, everything on here is just incredible. And yeah, while so far it's my favorite album of the year, it's definitely a very, very good listen if you're... So yeah, Billie Eilish, When We Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? The newest album on this list, again, my favorite album of the year, could change. But so far I'm pretty adamant that this is my favorite. Not the best album of the year, because I'm putting... the list I've got written out so far, this is not number one, but it is my favorite of the year, which is strange. But I do have what I think is the best album of the year at number one, and I will reveal all before the end of the year. But yeah, I want to catch up on a few albums I missed before I do that list properly. But yeah, here is... but for now, this is probably my favorite one of the year so far, and an album that's just impacted me wildly throughout the entire year. Because as soon as I drop the song Bad Guy in a DJ set when I'm in the nightclubs, the crowd goes wild. I don't know what it is. But yeah, Billie Eilish, When We Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? Brilliant album. Gotta love it. This next one, 2010, this came out. And I remember one of my best friends at the time introduced me to this album, which also introduced me to this band, which in turn also introduced me to more bands from this genre. Nightmare by Avenged Sevenfold. The only metal band I think I don't overlook. The only metal band where... well, I wouldn't say that, because there's obviously metal bands I used to listen to before I converted to a diehard hip-hop fan. But this is a band that I remember really loving when I heard this album for the first time. Because I think it was new on the scene. I think it was just brand new out. And my friend was obsessed with like all this type of metal for sure. Like, you know, Avenged Sevenfold, Skillet, Evanescence, those type of bands. And he played me the song Nightmare. And since I heard that, I just wanted to hear what else was in store on this album, because there was a guitar solo on Nightmare that I remember really loving, and I wanted to hear what else they could do. So I checked out the rest of the album and just fell in love, man. So yes, although it's not the type of album I usually listen to, this is the only album from the metal album that I probably visit the most. Avenged Sevenfold's Nightmare. Love it. Anyway, here's another one. Again, you guys might not know this one as well, because there weren't that many pressed up. It's a British band. You kind of have to know about these guys to know them, but that's Fujii Miyagi. Now, their claim to fame, if you can see the hype sticker, you can see their name there. Their claim to fame was having a song in the first season, in the soundtrack to the first season of Breaking Bad. That's kind of the biggest thing they did. Now, if you're confused as to if you've seen Breaking Bad, it's the scene where Jesse Pinkman has had to find a new partner because Walter's dropped out of working with him, and he's cooking up the meth without Walter. And that there's a song that's playing while he's cooking up the meth in the van. The song is, well, the song's not on this album. It is the group Fujiya and Miyagi. What they are is they are a 5-piece krautrock band from Brighton here in the UK, and they're krautrock, indie rock. But this is an album that opened my eyes more to krautrock, because obviously I listened to Can, I listened to Kraftwerk, but that was about it. These guys really made me open up more. When I purchased their album, David, who I think is the lead singer, wrote a personalized note. So yeah, love this, and yeah, love this album. Shame the song that's not in Breaking Bad is not on this album. It's actually on an earlier album, which is a bit more expensive if it is on vinyl, but love this album. Just incredible stuff, man. I wish I could talk more about these albums, but I don't want this video to drag on for too long. I mean, we're 26 minutes in, and I've still got 7 more albums to go, so we'll see how this goes. Yeah, yet again, another album from last year, Blood Orange's Negro Swan. An album that introduced me to Blood Orange, believe it or not. In fact, introduced me to this kind of R&B, because I obviously listened to, R&B and hip-hop in general, but this is more what's called alternative R&B. And before this album came out, I didn't really listen to that kind of R&B, but to alternative R&B, but he's British alternative R&B and sounds really good. Songs like Charcoal Baby, Chewing Gum, Out of Your League, Saint, Orlando, Running as well, all really, really good songs. Just a stellar album from start to finish, but also another very chilled album, so there you go. That was Blood Orange, Negro Swan. Here's another one. Also charted. Keep in mind, at the time these albums were coming out, I was listening to Eminem, Dr. Dre, 50 Cent, Jay-Z, and whatever was out on the radio. So of course, Bruno Mars's Doo-Wops and Hooligans had a wild impact, because I think, the songs that were on the radio, Grenade, Just the Way You Are, the Love Song, or the Lazy Song. Why did I read that as the Love Song? I don't know. The Lazy Song and Marry You were kind of the four songs off of this album that were all over the radio at the time. And obviously he's had 2 more albums since this one in the span of the decade, but this is probably the one that not just had the biggest impact on me, because obviously around the time this album was coming out, I was only just getting into music that was on the radio. So yeah, of course we had this one. Pretty sweet album, but yeah, Bruno Mars's Doo-Wops and Hooligans. I have a soft spot for anything Bruno Mars has done, just because of this album, and so because this probably impacted me the most out of all of his albums, I'm gonna put it as my favorite one in his catalog. But I always struggle to pick one out of his catalog to say is my favorite. So again, this list isn't set in stone but this is as I'm recording it. So there you go. Doo-Wops and Hooligans by Bruno Mars. This should be no surprise. I mean, I know I haven't talked about this album too much recently, but this is one I tend to play a lot, especially at work. That's Liquid Spirit by Gregory Porter. I at least play the song, the title track, Liquid Spirit. Also play Water Under Bridges, Hey Laura, 3. Yeah. Man, when this came out, when this came out, when was this? 2000 and... Oh, this was 2013. I always thought this was 2015, but maybe it's not. But around about the time of 2015, I had just started a music course at the local college. So I was learning how to produce music, do the live stuff, in the studio, all the live music, basically all the stuff you see behind the scenes, not the actual performance side. Um, and when I started that course, I just discovered this album because we were doing a little essay, if you will, on remixes, and there was a very nice remix of the song Liquid Spirit that I kind of accidentally stumbled across while I was doing my dissertation or my essay on remixes, and that kind of made me fall in love. Check out the original version. I liked the original version just as much as I liked that remix, and so I just fell in love with this album hard. So yeah, Gregory Porter's Liquid Spirit is gonna come in at, well, I'm not even ranking these, am I? But this was an album that, yeah, that one impacted me massively. What do we have next? Arcade Fire, The Suburbs. I don't know why I pulled this one, because Everything Now was kind of the album that introduced me to them. But for some reason, I think it's because this album connected with me sonically, and I actually preferred a lot this album as a whole. Whereas with Everything Now, I kind of pick and choose the songs I like now. But this album, when I bought this blindly just because it was an Arcade Fire album. I remember that much. But yeah, this album is incredible. The opening 2 songs on here, the title track, The Suburbs, and then Ready to Start, as well as odd songs in the middle of the album like We Used to Wait, and The Month of May, and City with No Children. All had I remember putting this on I was going to put it on in the background the day I bought it, but I heard The Suburbs and the vocal came in, and I just stopped everything I was doing, and from the moment the album finished till the very last song on side 4, I just sat and listened to this album intently, because examined the album, like what it was doing, what is it doing sonically. This album really did a number on me. I examined it, and I think it stuck with me for about 2 days straight. That's how much I love that album. Still got 3 more to talk about here. I apologize about the length, by the way. I don't normally go on this much, but these albums kind of need some explaining. Much like this album, and much like the Blood Orange, it's an album that kind of did get me. This is kind of what started getting into the alternative R&B, but because this had other influences from like hip hop, and I knew this artist from the Jay-Z Kanye West album because he featured on one of the tracks on that album. But yeah, that is Frank Ocean's Channel Orange. And the song, what's the song? Lost, I think, is the song I heard on here that made me want to check out this album as a whole, as well as the songs Thinking About You, Pyramids, Forrest Gump, and Super Rich Kids. Just really had a huge impact. And of course, because of Frank Ocean, I listened to Frank Ocean, I listened to Blood Orange, I listened to all other artists who are very similar in this type of R&B, and it's because of this album. I don't like too much else that Frank Ocean's done, but I love this album, and that's very strange to me. Much like Billie Eilish, I was introduced to this band by the same ex-girlfriend that introduced me to Billie Eilish, and that's Everything, Everything, A Fever Dream. I know this album is different from the albums they put out previously in their catalog, but I love this one. Just from front to back, you've got Night of the Long Knives, Can't Do, and Desire to open the album, as well as other songs in between, and closes with the song White Whale. But I've talked about this album quite a bit since I picked it up, and I just cannot stop talking about it. I love it. I do. I love this album, and I'll admit that. And I don't care how many times I have to say it. This is a great album. Check it out if you don't know it. If you like Arcade Fire, I guess, and you like Arctic Monkey, well, not really Arctic Monkeys as much, but if you like Arcade Fire, like the Suburbs, you might like this. It's more Civ based than Arcade Fire are, but it's still a good album. I love it. Right, this album, I saved this one until last on purpose, and this album, well, it's not my favourite album from this artist's catalogue. What it did for me on an emotional level really impacted me hard, because when this album came out, I was still fresh to listening to this artist. I had only just discovered this artist before this album came out, and I remember going for a really tough time around the time this album was coming out, especially through school and things like that. And I just didn't have a lot of confidence in myself, and then I started listening to this album, and my confidence was growing a little bit more, and it kind of, just the way he, lyrically, it kind of helped me back on my feet, and while I don't think I fully gained that confidence back until I got into my music course in college, I was still more confident than I was before I started listening to this album, and that is Recovery by Eminem. Now, I know it's not his best album in his catalogue. I know it's looked down on nowadays compared to his earlier work. But man, before this came out, I had listened to Lose Yourself and become a new Eminem fan, and I think about a week later, the single for Not Afraid dropped, and I remember really loving that single. So I wanted to see and that's the song that really like made me give me that first boost, and then the whole album dropped, and I was just blown away. 2010, so I would have been 13. Jesus, man, this album, while I don't listen to it that much nowadays, because it does bring back those memories, it still really helped me out of that rough patch, and it's still a nice album to throw on and listen to if I need a nice boost, but it's not my most it's probably the Eminem album I listen to the least nowadays, outside of Revival, which we don't talk about. But yeah, Recovery really helped me out of that spot, and for that reason I treasure this album so much. And if I could say more about this, then I would, but I don't want to say too much, because to me it has that sentimental value, that this is the album that helped me out of a tough time in my life album. And when I was going through that time, I would listen to this album. I think by the end of my school, I think by the end of the year, I had memorized the lyrics to this album front and back, even could probably recite it backwards. That's how well I knew it by the end of the year. And then by the end of my school life, I could probably do that to Eminem's entire catalog. This is the reason I praise Eminem so much and praise his music to the highest form, and say he's my favorite rapper, because of this album and that time I was going through when this album came out. And that's how personal it is. I don't really want to talk too much about it and get all emotional and get you guys emotional because of it. But yeah, just so you know, that's the album that helped me through it and kind of the reason I'm still here today. I won't talk about it too much, but yeah, that album helped me through a lot. So, that's going to do it for this video. Sorry to end on a downer there, but I want you guys to know, what are your favorite albums of the 2010s? It can be any album from 2010 right up to 2019. I know that's a huge span of albums to pick from. I know not everyone listens to albums from the 2010s, which is fine. I mean, I know there's not that many I listen to anymore. I think as I'm recording this from 2019, I've really only listened to about 7 or 8 albums from this year, which is not good at all. So, anyways, I'm gonna sign out before I ramble on too much. Please do a video response to this. I would love to make this a thread for the end of the year. And yeah, let's see what the rest of 2019 has in store. If I don't see you before Christmas, have a very good Christmas or a happy holidays if you don't celebrate Christmas. And with that said and done, I hope to see you guys at some point. Peace.